The encounter on Gorin 7. In the infinite vastness of the galaxy, humanity had carved a reputation not by sheer numbers, but by its uncanny ability to adapt, innovate, and survive. Gorin 7, a planet orbiting the distant star of Epsilon V, was far from the cradle of Earth, but it was the perfect stage for a turning point in intergalactic relations, a place where peace was sought. Yet the stakes were as high as the uncharted voids of space. Ethan Blackwell, a decorated officer of the Intergalactic Peace Force, stood tall as a symbol of Earth's resilience. He had seen his fair share of battles, and each one had shaped him into the strategist and leader he was today. His reputation as a negotiator and tactical genius had earned him missions that others feared, but none were as important as the one he was about to undertake. His mission on Gorin 7 was not a simple diplomatic task. The Zhan, an alien species that had once been humanity's greatest threat, had recently shown signs of willing to negotiate peace. For years, the Zhan had engaged Earth in a bitter war, their advanced technology and military prowess leaving humanity on the brink of annihilation. But in recent months, something had changed within their ranks. Rumors of dissent, power struggles, and the looming threat of a galactic-scale rebellion had brought them to the table. For the first time, humanity and the Zhan were poised to speak of peace. Ethan's role was to broker that peace and ensure Earth's interests were safeguarded. As Ethan's ship, the Resolute, touched down on the dusty surface of Gorin 7, the air crackled with tension. He surveyed the horizon, a jagged landscape filled with ancient alien ruins, their purpose lost to time. In the distance, a massive fortress stood tall, a silent guardian to the negotiations that were about to take place. It was there that he would meet the Zhan emissaries, and it was there that fate would take an unexpected turn. The Zhan had already arrived, their ships hovering ominously over the landing bay. The emissary leading the delegation, a tall, imposing figure named Lord Heiress, greeted Ethan with a formal nod. His alien features were sharp, angular, and unsettling. His eyes, deep pools of dark reflective substance, gave nothing away. But Ethan had seen enough to know that beneath that cold exterior was a mind just as calculating as his own. "We are glad you could make it, Captain Blackwell," Lord Heiress said in a voice that seemed to echo from deep within the pit of his chest. His tone was businesslike, but there was something in his eyes, a subtle challenge. "We have much to discuss." Ethan nodded curtly, his expression betraying little. "Let's get to it, then. There's no time to waste." Before they could proceed, a sharp hiss filled the air as the ground trembled beneath them. A sleek black ship descended from the sky with a precision that could only be attributed to elite pilots. The ship landed with barely a sound, and the hatch opened to reveal a figure who caught Ethan completely off guard. She stepped onto the barren ground like a vision of alien elegance, her silhouette framed by the shimmering lights of her ship. Her skin, an otherworldly shade of violet, shimmered under the harsh light of Gorin 7's twin suns. Her long, flowing hair cascaded behind her, streaked with streaks of luminous white, like distant stars. She was tall, impossibly graceful, with an air of authority that sent an undeniable wave of tension through the air. This was Lyra Voss, an alien Heiress from a far-off empire, a figure that Ethan had only heard rumors about, a merciless leader, a brilliant strategist, and perhaps most intriguingly, the heir to the Voss quantum empire, a powerful and secretive empire that had remained largely out of reach for many galactic factions. Her reputation was as fearsome as it was mysterious, and yet she didn't appear like the ruthless ruler the stories described. She exuded a strange sense of confidence that bordered on arrogance, with an aura that was both mesmerizing and intimidating. As Lyra approached, her amber eyes, gleaming like molten gold, flicked over Ethan with cold disinterest. The other Zhan delegates stepped aside to make way for her, though they seemed to bow their heads slightly in respect. She was a figure of power, no doubt about it, but there was something about her, an energy, a mystery, that Ethan could not ignore. The moment she stepped closer, she looked at Ethan with disdain. Her eyes briefly flickered toward his ship, then to the surroundings, and then back to him. A cold smirk danced across her lips. "This bag is worth more than you," she said loudly, her voice sharp, yet laced with amusement. She clutched a strange, intricately designed bag made of unknown materials, its surfaces shimmering with patterns Ethan couldn't begin to decipher. Her tone was casual, as if she were stating a simple fact, not an insult. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, not sure how to respond to such an audacious declaration. But before he could speak, the ground shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. A deafening explosion tore through the air, followed by a barrage of blaster fire. Ethan instinctively pulled out his sidearm, his military instincts kicking in as he dropped into a combat stance. The Jean emissaries reacted quickly, scrambling for cover. "Get down," Ethan shouted to Lyra, who, without hesitation, was already in motion, her body moving like a panther, agile and fluid. She dashed behind a rocky formation, narrowly avoiding the blasts that now rained down on them. Ethan scanned the horizon, his mind racing. Several figures, clad in dark armor, appeared from the shadows, their blasters trained on the gathering. The mercenaries had arrived, and they were intent on causing chaos. But it wasn't just random thugs. Ethan knew the difference between common criminals and professional assassins. These mercenaries were organized, their movements coordinated. This was an attack with purpose. He moved swiftly to take cover, pulling Lyra behind him. "Stay down," he ordered, though he could already see she was preparing to fight back. Despite the danger, he couldn't help but notice the determination in her eyes. She wasn't frightened, only calculating, analyzing the situation. The firefight intensified as the mercenaries advanced, their weapons unleashing plasma fire that scorched the ground. Ethan dove into action, firing back with precision, his military training taking over. He was a blur of motion, taking down the attackers one by one. Lyra, meanwhile, was far from a helpless bystander. She moved with a fluidity that belied her alien physiology, using her powers to create a shimmering shield of energy that deflected blaster fire. In moments, the attackers were scattered, their mission thwarted by the combined efforts of Ethan and Lyra. As the last mercenary retreated, Lyra turned to him, her face a mask of calm amidst the chaos. She looked up at him, her eyes now filled with something new. Respect, perhaps. "Well, Captain Blackwell," she said with a cool smile, "it seems you are more useful than I thought." Ethan didn't respond immediately. His breath was heavy from the adrenaline, his heart still racing from the intensity of the battle. But despite the danger, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter with Lyra was only the beginning. The galaxy, it seemed, had a way of testing the limits of human resilience, and Ethan Blackwell had just been thrown into the deep end. As the dust settled, he couldn't help but wonder, what was inside that bag, and why did it hold such value? What had just happened on Gorin 7, and how was he connected to it all? One thing was certain, the journey ahead would be far from ordinary. The hidden agenda. The dust of battle still lingered in the air as Ethan Blackwell and Lyra Voss stood amidst the wreckage of the mercenary assault. The hum of distant blaster fire and the wail of security alarms faded into a haunting silence, broken only by the faint hiss of the wind sweeping over the cracked terrain of Gorin 7. The landing bay, once a pristine and orderly space, had become a chaotic battlefield. Bodies of the attackers lay strewn across the ground, their weapons still smoldering from the heat of the confrontation. Despite the danger, Lyra seemed unshaken, her amber eyes scanning the scene with a detached calm. Ethan, on the other hand, was processing everything at once. The attack, the mysterious alien Heiress, and the unsettling thought that this was no ordinary ambush. The mercenaries had been too precise, their tactics too refined. This had been planned. Someone had orchestrated this attack with the clear intent of stopping the peace talks between the Jean and Earth. But who? Ethan snapped back to the present as Lyra's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. "We need to move." Now, as she said, her tone no longer laced with disdain, but with an edge of urgency that Ethan couldn't ignore. She turned on her heel, heading toward the ship that had brought her to Gorin 7. The strange bag was still clutched in her hands, its weight seemingly as much a part of her as her own skin. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. His first instinct was to stay and investigate, to uncover the identity of those behind the ambush. But Lyra's words rang in his ears. "We need to move." She was right. Whoever had sent those mercenaries wasn't finished yet, and their plan was far from over. Without a word, he followed her, his boots crunching against the dusty ground as they made their way to the sleek vessel, the Onyx Rift, her personal transport. The craft, a marvel of alien engineering, gleamed under the twin suns of Gorin 7. Its dark hull absorbed the light around it, making it seem almost like a shadow in the fading light. It was designed for speed and stealth, perfect for someone of Lyra's stature, someone who likely needed to remain undetected at all costs. Lyra stepped onto the ship without a glance back, her movements fluid and purposeful. Ethan followed, and the hatch closed behind them with a soft hiss. Inside, the ship was as cold and calculating as its exterior. Dark panels lined the walls, lit only by the glow of various control systems. There were no unnecessary comforts here, no decorations. This was a place of business, and it was clear that Lyra was a woman who valued efficiency over anything else. "Take the helm," Lyra instructed as she walked toward the central command seat, dropping into it with the grace of someone who was used to being in control. The bag was placed beside her, resting on the chair like it was a piece of her very being. Ethan, though used to command himself, had no issue with her taking charge. The stakes were too high, and this was her ship. Without a word, he moved to the nearby station, activating the ship's systems and preparing for takeoff. The Onyx Rift shuddered to life as its engines hummed softly, and the ship lifted off the ground, ascending into the sky. As they climbed higher, Ethan could see the John delegation's ships in the distance, still hovering over the landing bay, seemingly unaware of the chaos that had just transpired. Once they were clear of the planet's atmosphere, Lyra turned to him. Her eyes, though still cold, carried a flicker of something else, something that hinted at complexity beneath her icy exterior. "You're wondering why I didn't let you investigate the attack," she said, her voice calm but laced with a subtle threat. "You're wondering if I'm hiding something." Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. He had learned long ago not to show too much in front of those he didn't trust. But in truth, Lyra's behavior had piqued his curiosity. The attack, the bag, the strange combination of arrogance and control she exuded, it all pointed to something deeper. "I'm not a fool," he replied finally. "I know that attack was no coincidence, and I know you're more than just a spoiled heir to some galactic empire. There's something going on here, and I intend to find out what." Lyra studied him for a moment, her lips curling into a faint, almost amused smile. "You're persistent, Captain Blackwell. I'll give you that." She paused for a moment, as if deciding whether or not to share her secrets. Finally, she spoke again, but this time, her voice was quieter, more measured. "You're right. That attack wasn't random. It was planned, and it was meant to send a message." Ethan turned toward her, his attention now fully on her. A message to who? Lyra's gaze hardened as she looked out the viewport at the distant stars. "To me." Her words hung in the air, charged with an intensity that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. There was more to her than he had initially thought. She wasn't just some Heiress caught in the middle of galactic politics. She was entangled in something far more dangerous, and far more personal. "Why?" Ethan pressed, his mind racing. "What do they want with you?" Lyra's eyes shifted back to him, her expression becoming more distant. "You're not the only one who has enemies, Captain. The Voss family has made many influential people very uncomfortable over the years. The bag I carry, it's more than just a trinket. It holds something far more valuable than you could imagine. Something that many would kill for." Ethan frowned, his mind grappling with the implications of her words. A simple bag, now clearly not so simple. And what's in it? Lyra leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. It's not just about what's inside the bag. It's what the contents represent. Power. Control. The future of entire star systems. If it falls into the wrong hands, everything could be lost. Ethan absorbed her words carefully. The Voss quantum empire was an enigma, one of the most secretive and influential powers in the galaxy. For years, its reach had been felt, but its true purpose remained hidden. If Lyra truly was in possession of something that valuable, then she wasn't just a political figure. She was a key player in a much larger game, one that he was now tangled in, whether he liked it or not. So you think someone wants to take control of this empire? Ethan asked, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Lyra's eyes hardened once again. Not just someone. There are factions within the John and beyond, all competing for supremacy. My father's death was no accident. He was assassinated because of the power of the Voss family. And I've inherited his enemies. Ethan stood still, processing her confession. This was no ordinary diplomatic mission. It was a race for survival, one that would see the fate of entire star systems hang in the balance. Then we need to get you to safety, and we need to make sure that bag doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile. For once, I agree with you, Captain. Let's see how far your human ingenuity can take us. As the Onyx Rift sped into the cold expanse of space, leaving Gorin 7 behind, Ethan knew one thing for certain. His life, and the fate of the galaxy, had just become intertwined with Lyra Voss's in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. The journey ahead would test every ounce of his resolve, and the stakes had never been higher. The chase across the stars, the hum of the Onyx Rift as it cut through the void of space, was a constant companion in the tense silence that had fallen over the ship. Ethan Blackwell sat at the navigation console, his fingers dancing over the controls with practiced precision, guiding them deeper into the unknown reaches of space. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks of white light as they accelerated to faster-than-light speeds, their destination unknown even to him. Beside him, Lyra Voss remained an enigma, her golden eyes distant, as though she were lost in thought, or perhaps plotting. The strange bag sat next to her, as always, like an extension of her body. Its glowing symbols seemed to pulse with an energy that neither of them could fully understand. It was a constant reminder of the weight of the mission they now shared. Are you sure we're heading in the right direction? Lyra's voice, cool and measured, broke the silence. She hadn't taken her eyes off the bag for the entire journey, but she still had the presence of mind to ask questions. Yes, Ethan replied without looking up, his gaze fixed on the glowing coordinates that appeared on his console. If we stay on course, we'll reach the designated rendezvous point within a few hours. You'll be safe there. Lyra's amber eyes flickered in his direction. There was something calculating in the way she studied him, something that made Ethan uneasy, though he had long since grown accustomed to feeling uneasy when dealing with beings like her. Lyra wasn't just an alien Heiress. She was a force of nature. The longer he was around her, the more he realized that there was more at play than a simple political assassination or corporate power struggle. You think I'm safe? She asked, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. You're naive, Captain Blackwell. Ethan's fingers paused on the controls. He could feel the weight of her words, but he had long since stopped pretending to know everything. He didn't know who was after her, or why they wanted the contents of the bag, but he knew enough to realize that he wasn't just involved in a mission anymore. This had become something more personal. We're all at risk here, Ethan said, turning his seat to face her. You're not the only one with enemies. Whoever's behind this won't stop until they get what they want. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. I don't need protection, Blackwell. I've managed to survive far longer than you would believe without anyone's help. Her tone was a mix of pride and bitterness, as if she resented the very idea of needing someone to shield her from danger. Ethan gave her a wry smile. "And yet here you are, aboard my ship. Looks to me like you need my help now more than ever." The air between them thickened, tension crackling like static. But before either of them could speak further, a sharp, warning beep from the ship's control panel cut through the silence. "Incoming vessels," the automated voice announced coldly. "3 unmarked ships are on an intercept course. They are closing fast." Ethan's hand moved instinctively to the weapons console. The ship's defenses flared to life, shields powering up, and the targeting systems activated. He exchanged a quick glance with Lyra, who seemed disturbingly calm in the face of the impending threat. "Are you expecting company?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Lyra stood from her seat, her eyes narrowing as she stared out the viewport. "Not like this," she muttered, her hand instinctively moving to the bag at her side. "Are they after the bag?" Ethan asked, his mind racing to piece together the puzzle. Lyra's gaze was still fixed on the ships that were now closing in on them. "Yes," she said simply, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're after the Voss legacy. They've been following me for days, waiting for the right moment to strike. They'll stop at nothing to take it from me." The ships grew larger in the viewport, their sleek, menacing silhouettes now visible against the black expanse of space. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to act quickly. These weren't just random mercenaries. They were organized, disciplined. Their approach was calculated, as though they knew exactly how to engage the Onyx Rift. "Can we outrun them?" Ethan asked, his hands flying across the controls to bring the ship into evasive maneuvers. Lyra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached down and pulled the bag onto her lap, her fingers tracing its intricate designs. The symbols seemed to pulse with energy, almost as if they were alive. Then, with a sharp inhale, she spoke. "Maybe, but we need to disable their ships first. If we don't, we're sitting ducks." Ethan gritted his teeth and shifted the ship into high gear. They veered into a sharp turn, diving toward a nearby asteroid field that lay between them and the approaching ships. The debris from ancient collisions would make for excellent cover, but only if they could move fast enough. He could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins as the ship rattled with the force of the maneuver. The first enemy ship fired. A massive bolt of plasma shot past them, just grazing the Onyx Rift's shields. The energy shield flickered briefly before stabilizing, but it was clear they couldn't take too many more hits. "Hold on," Ethan shouted as he pulled the ship into a sharp roll, narrowly avoiding another barrage of plasma fire. Lyra's eyes were locked on the pursuing ships, her mind working through the situation with the precision of a seasoned tactician. Ethan had to admit, despite her arrogance, she knew how to handle herself in a fight. Her focus seemed to sharpen even as the danger mounted. "We need to get closer to them," Lyra said, her voice calm. "But we can't let them lock onto us first. Once we're within range, I'll disable their engines." Ethan nodded. "I'm trusting you on this." With that, he steered the Onyx Rift toward the lead enemy vessel, threading their way through the asteroid field at breakneck speed. The ship rocked violently as they dodged incoming fire and weaving through the rocky debris. The asteroid field seemed endless, but it also gave them the element of surprise. Their pursuers couldn't predict their every move. "Ready," Lyra said, her voice steady, despite the chaos around them. She turned to face the console, activating a series of complex controls that Ethan had never seen before. The ship's interior hummed with energy as Lyra channeled power from the ship's core into a targeting system of her own design. The bag at her side seemed to react, its symbols glowing brighter in the dim light of the cabin. Ethan didn't question her methods. He trusted her, at least for now. "On your mark," he said, his voice taut. With a flick of her wrist, Lyra unleashed a burst of energy. The Onyx Rift shuddered as a beam of concentrated energy shot out toward the lead enemy vessel. It struck with pinpoint accuracy, severing the ship's engine conduits. The vessel immediately lost speed and veered off course, spiraling out of control. "One down," Lyra said, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. "Two to go." Ethan glanced back at the other two ships, both still closing in on them. "I'll keep them distracted. You finish what you started." Lyra nodded, her focus unwavering. "Just don't get yourself killed." As they continued to weave through the asteroid field, the remaining enemy ships grew desperate, their movements erratic as they tried to catch up. But with each passing second, they were growing more and more vulnerable. Lyra's precise attacks were taking their toll. Another blast of energy erupted from the Onyx Rift, this time targeting the second enemy ship's communication array. The vessel went silent, its lights flickering as it drifted helplessly. The remaining ship, now outgunned and outmaneuvered, attempted one final desperate assault. But it was too late. With one last maneuver, Ethan spun the ship around, unleashing a devastating volley of fire. The final enemy vessel exploded in a ball of flame, its wreckage scattered across the void. The Onyx Rift came to a sudden halt, its engines humming gently as Ethan exhaled a deep breath. "That should do it," he muttered, his hands still gripping the controls. Lyra leaned back in her seat, her expression unreadable. "Not bad, Captain," she said quietly, almost as if she were talking to herself. "But we've only just begun." Ethan couldn't help but agree. This was only the beginning of a much larger war, and the stakes were higher than either of them could imagine. As the stars continued to streak past them, Ethan knew that the road ahead would be filled with danger, but also with unexpected alliances, and perhaps, if they were lucky, a chance for humanity to prove its worth on a galactic scale. But for now, they were safe. And that, for the moment, was enough.